Christopher Columbus, the explorer who bridged two worlds, remains an enigmatic figure centuries after his voyages. His name evokes a mix of admiration and controversy, his legacy a tapestry woven with threads of discovery, ambition and tragedy. Born in Genoa, Italy, in 1451, Columbus ventured into the unknown, forever altering the course of history. His expeditions across the Atlantic Ocean opened up a new world to Europe, sparking an era of exploration, colonization and cultural exchange. Columbus's voyages, however, were not without their dark side. While he sought fame and fortune, his arrival in the Americas brought devastation to indigenous populations. His encounters with the native inhabitants were marked by conflict, exploitation, and the introduction of diseases that decimated their numbers. The consequences of his voyages continue to resonate today, shaping our understanding of colonialism, cultural identity, and the complex relationship between the Old World and the New. This exploration of Columbus's life delves into the man behind the myth, examining both his triumphs and his failures. From his humble beginnings to his audacious ambitions, we will trace the path that led him across the ocean and into the annals of history. We will explore the complexities of his character, the forces that shaped his destiny, and the enduring impact of his voyages on the world we know today. Columbus's story begins in Genoa, Italy. Born into a working-class family, his father was a wool weaver and his mother raised him in a modest home. Columbus received a basic education and developed a fascination with the sea. Genoa, a major maritime power, inspired his dreams of adventure. As a teenager, Columbus went to sea, gaining experience as a sailor. He traveled the Mediterranean, absorbing knowledge of seafaring and trade. His voyages exposed him to different cultures, broadening his horizons. Columbus became interested in cartography and astronomy. He developed theories about the Earth's geography. Columbus believed he could find a shorter route to the East Indies by sailing westward. His ideas were met with skepticism by many scholars. Columbus spent years seeking patronage for his voyage. He approached monarchs but was repeatedly rejected. Undeterred, Columbus refined his plans, convinced of his revolutionary discovery. In 1492, after years of tireless efforts, Columbus secured the support of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain. The Spanish monarchs, eager to find a westward route to Asia and to challenge Portuguese dominance in the spice trade, agreed to finance his expedition. On August 3, 1492, Columbus set sail from Palos de la Frontera, Spain, with 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. He embarked on a journey into the unknown, carrying with him the hopes and dreams of a nation and the potential to reshape the world. The voyage was long and arduous, testing the limits of Columbus's skills as a navigator and the endurance of his crew. After more than 2 months at sea, facing dwindling supplies and mounting tensions among his men, Columbus finally sighted land on October 12, 1492. He had reached an island in the Bahamas, which he named San Salvador, believing he had arrived in the East Indies. Columbus's discovery of the Americas marked a pivotal moment in history. It ushered in an era of European exploration and colonization, forever changing the relationship between the Eastern and Western hemispheres. The news of his findings spread rapidly throughout Europe, sparking a wave of excitement and wonder. Columbus returned to Spain a hero, hailed as the man who had discovered a new world. Christopher Columbus, born in 1451 in Genoa, Italy, grew up in a bustling port city. His father, Domenico, was a wool weaver. The vibrant harbour life inspired young Christopher's dreams of the sea. The sea's allure was irresistible, shaping his destiny. The Colombo family, though engaged in the wool trade, had a history intertwined with the sea. Christopher's ancestors hailed from the Ligurian coast, a region with a long tradition of seafaring. Some accounts suggest his relatives were involved in fishing, coastal trading, or even privateering. This maritime heritage likely instilled in Christopher a familiarity with the sea. Domenico secured for his son a position as a cabin boy on a merchant ship. This initial voyage provided Christopher with his first taste of life at sea. He learned the rudiments of sailing, discipline, and teamwork. As Christopher gained experience, he advanced through the ranks of the ship's crew. His voyages took him to various ports throughout the Mediterranean. Each voyage was a learning experience, honing his seafaring skills. Tales of distant lands fueled Christopher's imagination, igniting his desire to explore the unknown. As Christopher matured into a skilled sailor, his ambitions grew beyond the confines of the Mediterranean Sea. He devoured books on geography, astronomy, and travel, seeking knowledge that would enable him to venture farther than any European sailor before him. He studied the works of ancient Greek geographers like Ptolemy, who believed the Earth was a sphere, and Arab scholars like al-Idrisi, whose maps extended far beyond the known world of medieval Europe. Christopher became convinced that by sailing westward across the Atlantic Ocean, he could find a shorter route to the East Indies, the source of valuable spices, silks, and other treasures. This belief, though considered radical by many of his contemporaries, was based on his interpretation of ancient texts, his own calculations of the Earth's circumference, and his unwavering faith in his own abilities. Christopher's conviction was strengthened by his encounters with Portuguese sailors who had explored the coast of Africa. Their voyages, driven by Prince Henry the Navigator's quest to find a sea route to the east, had pushed the boundaries of European exploration. They returned with tales of new lands, strange creatures, and the promise of reaching the Indies by sailing around the southern tip of Africa. Christopher, however, believed that a westward route would be shorter and faster. He envisioned a world where the Atlantic Ocean, rather than a vast, unnavigable expanse, was a bridge connecting Europe to the riches of the East. This vision, fueled by ambition, faith, and a thirst for knowledge, would consume him for years to come. Christopher's early adulthood was a blend of seafaring and self-education. He ventured beyond the Mediterranean, gaining invaluable experience. These journeys taught him the Atlantic's unpredictable nature. On land he studied cartography, astronomy, and cosmography. He honed his navigational skills with instruments like the astrolabe. He pored over ancient maps, seeking clues about distant lands. His pursuit of knowledge was driven by ambition to reach the East by sailing west. He believed such a discovery would bring him fame and fortune. This belief led him to seek patronage from Spain's royal court. His early life laid the foundation for his extraordinary journey. The sights and sounds of Genoa's port, his family's heritage, and his ambition shaped the man who would alter history. Armed with his unwavering belief, his carefully crafted maps, and a heart filled with ambition, Christopher Columbus embarked on a quest for patronage. His goal was to secure funding for his westward voyage, a journey that he believed would lead him to the fabled East Indies. His search for a sponsor took him to the royal courts of Europe, where he presented his bold proposal to kings and queens, hoping to find a leader who shared his vision and his faith. Columbus first sought the support of King John II of Portugal, a monarch known for his interest in maritime exploration. Portugal, at the forefront of European expansion, had already sponsored numerous voyages down the coast of Africa, seeking a sea route to the east. Columbus, however, believed that his westward route offered a shorter and more direct path to the Indies. He presented his case to the Portuguese court, but his proposal was met with skepticism and ultimately rejected. Undeterred by this initial setback, Columbus turned his attention to other potential patrons. He sent his brother Bartholomew to the courts of England and France, seeking to drum up support for his expedition. Bartholomew's efforts, however, proved fruitless. The English and French monarchs, preoccupied with their own affairs, showed little interest in financing a risky and uncertain voyage across the vast Atlantic Ocean. Columbus, facing rejection after rejection, refused to give up on his dream. He continued to refine his calculations, to study maps and charts, and to hone his arguments. He believed that his destiny lay across the ocean, and he was determined to find a way to make his voyage a reality. Columbus's proposal was a daring vision, challenging the geographical knowledge of the time. He argued for a shorter route to the East Indies, promising wealth and new lands for Spain. Despite skepticism, Columbus remained unwavering, presenting himself as a visionary chosen by God. After years of tireless efforts, Columbus finally found the support he sought in the Spanish monarchs, King Ferdinand II of Aragon and Queen Isabella I of Castile. Driven by a desire to expand Spanish influence, to compete with Portugal's growing maritime power, and perhaps swayed by Columbus's unwavering conviction, the monarchs agreed to finance his expedition. The agreement, formalized in the capitulations of Santa Fe, granted Columbus the titles of Admiral of the Ocean Sea, Viceroy and Governor of any lands he might discover. It also promised him a share of the riches he hoped to find. With royal patronage secured, Columbus set about making preparations for his momentous voyage. On August 3, 1492, Columbus set sail from the port of Palos de la Frontera, Spain, with 3 ships, the Niña, the Pinta and the Santa Maria. The ships, though small by modern standards, were sturdy vessels, crewed by experienced sailors who braved the unknown alongside their determined captain. The voyage west was fraught with challenges: unpredictable weather, dwindling supplies, and the psychological strain of sailing into uncharted territory. As weeks turned into months with no sight of land, doubts and anxieties grew among the crew. Some questioned Columbus's leadership, his sanity, even his loyalty. Mutiny simmered beneath the surface, threatening to derail the expedition before it reached its destination. Columbus, however, remained resolute, drawing strength from his faith, his ambition, and his unwavering belief in his mission. After more than 2 months at sea, on the night of October 11, 1492, a lookout aboard the Pinta cried out, "Tierra! Tierra!" Land had been sighted. The following morning, Columbus and his crew went ashore, landing on an island in the Bahamas that he named San Salvador. Columbus, believing he had reached the East Indies, called the native inhabitants Indians, a misnomer that has persisted for centuries. The encounter between the Europeans and the indigenous people of the Americas was a momentous event, marking the beginning of a new era in world history. Columbus, dressed in his finest attire and carrying the royal banner of Spain, claimed the island for his patrons, Ferdinand and Isabella. He described the native people as gentle and friendly, eager to trade with the newcomers. Columbus's initial impressions of the New World were filled with wonder and optimism. He described the islands he encountered, Cuba, which he believed to be mainland China, and Hispaniola, present-day Haiti and the Dominican Republic, as paradises, rich in natural resources and inhabited by people who could be easily converted to Christianity and exploited for labor. The reality, however, was far more complex. Columbus, driven by his desire for gold and glory, failed to grasp the sophisticated cultures and complex social structures of the indigenous people he encountered. His arrival marked the beginning of a period of conquest, colonization, and exploitation that would have devastating consequences for the native populations of the Americas. After exploring the Caribbean and collecting gold, Columbus set sail for Spain in January 1493. He left men at La Navidad to explore and trade with the natives. The return voyage was challenging, with storms testing his seamanship. Columbus arrived in Lisbon in March 1493, received by King John II. He sent word to the Spanish monarchs and arrived in Palos in April. Columbus was hailed as a hero, celebrated for finding a new route to the east. He presented his findings to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. The monarchs were impressed and showered him with honors. Columbus was authorized to lead a second expedition to the New World. He had achieved fame and fortune beyond his wildest dreams. The impact of Columbus's discoveries reverberated across Europe, igniting a wave of excitement, curiosity, and ambition. His voyages, once dismissed as the folly of a madman, were now hailed as triumphs of human ingenuity and courage. He became a celebrity, his name synonymous with exploration, discovery, and the promise of untold riches. Printers rushed to publish accounts of his voyages, spreading the news of his findings far and wide. Maps were redrawn, incorporating the new lands he had discovered. Scholars and theologians grappled with the implications of his discoveries, debating the nature of the New World, the origins of its inhabitants, and the role of Christianity in this new era of exploration and expansion. Columbus's voyages ushered in a new era of European exploration and colonization, forever changing the relationship between the Eastern and Western hemispheres. His discoveries sparked a race among European powers to claim territory, to exploit resources, and to establish trade routes in the New World. The consequences of this encounter, however, would prove both profound and tragic. While Columbus basked in the glory of his achievements, the indigenous people he had encountered faced a far different fate: disease, displacement, enslavement, and the destruction of their cultures. The legacy of Columbus, once celebrated as a triumph of human endeavor, would become increasingly entangled with the darker aspects of European colonialism and its devastating impact on the native peoples of the Americas. Columbus's triumphant return to Spain ignited a fervor for exploration and riches. His second voyage in 1493 was grand, with 17 ships and over 1,200 men. Columbus, now Admiral of the Ocean Sea, aimed to establish a permanent Spanish presence. However, cracks began to appear in Columbus's image. The promise of wealth proved elusive. The gold he brought back paled in comparison to expectations. Colonists grew disillusioned with the hardships and lack of fortune. Indigenous populations began to resist Spanish attempts to subjugate them. Clashes between the Spanish and natives became common. The seeds of discontent began to take root. Columbus proved ill-equipped for governing a colony. His autocratic style and harsh treatment fostered resentment. The seeds of discontent sprouted, threatening Columbus's enterprise. Columbus's difficulties multiplied as he grappled with the challenges of governing Hispaniola. The colony, established on the premise of quick riches and effortless conversion of the native population, faced mounting problems. The search for gold, which had consumed much of the colonists' energy, yielded meager results, leading to frustration and despair. The forced labor system imposed on the indigenous population, driven by the insatiable demand for gold and the colonists' sense of entitlement, fueled resentment and resistance. The native inhabitants, their way of life disrupted, their beliefs challenged, and their bodies subjected to harsh treatment, began to rebel against their Spanish overlords. Columbus, facing mounting pressure to produce wealth and maintain order, responded with increasing severity. His policies, characterized by brutality and exploitation, further alienated the indigenous population and sowed discord among the colonists. Reports of his tyrannical rule, his harsh punishments, and his failure to establish a thriving colony began to filter back to Spain. The image of Columbus, the hero who had bridged two worlds, began to tarnish. In its place emerged a more troubling portrait, that of a flawed leader, ill-suited to the complexities of governance, his ambition and greed overshadowing his earlier idealism. The burden of governance, once a symbol of his triumph, became a heavy weight, dragging him down from the pinnacle of fame. As reports of unrest, brutality, and mismanagement in Hispaniola reached the Spanish court, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella found themselves facing mounting criticism of their chosen viceroy. Rumors of Columbus's tyrannical rule, his harsh treatment of both colonists and natives, and his failure to deliver on his promises of wealth and order began to circulate widely. Concerned about the deteriorating situation in the New World and the potential damage to their own reputations, the monarchs dispatched Francisco de Bobadilla, a royal commissioner, to investigate the allegations against Columbus. Bobadilla, arriving in Hispaniola in 1500, was greeted with a litany of complaints from disgruntled colonists who accused Columbus and his brothers of incompetence, corruption, and cruelty. Bobadilla, after conducting his inquiry, was appalled by what he found. He ordered the arrest of Columbus and his brothers, stripping them of their authority. The once revered admiral, now a prisoner accused of tyranny and mismanagement, was shackled and sent back to Spain in chains, a humiliating fall from grace for the man who had once been paraded through the streets of Barcelona as a hero. The accusations against Columbus, though perhaps exaggerated by his enemies, highlighted the growing chasm between the idealized image of the explorer and the realities of his rule. The investigation, a public spectacle of his failings, marked a turning point in his fortunes, signaling the beginning of his decline from national hero to disgraced colonial administrator. Columbus, arriving back in Spain in chains, was a stark contrast to the conquering hero who had returned from his first voyage. The sight of the admiral, once feted by monarchs and celebrated by the masses, now a prisoner accused of tyranny, shocked the Spanish court and sent ripples of disbelief throughout Europe. King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, though sympathetic to Columbus's plight, were also acutely aware of the political fallout from the scandal engulfing their most famous explorer. They ordered his release from prison, but hesitated to fully restore him to his former position. The accusations against him, though never formally proven, had tarnished his reputation and cast a long shadow over his achievements. While Columbus fought to clear his name and regain his lost titles, his enemies at court seized the opportunity to undermine his position. They pointed to the ongoing unrest in Hispaniola, the meager returns from the colony, and the persistent rumors of his brutality as evidence of his unsuitability for leadership. The Spanish monarchs, caught between their desire to support their once favored explorer and the need to maintain order and stability in their burgeoning empire, made a fateful decision. They stripped Columbus of his governorship of Hispaniola, effectively ending his political career and his dream of ruling over the lands he had discovered. Despite being stripped of his governorship and facing mounting criticism, Columbus remained convinced that he could regain the favor of the Spanish crown and salvage his legacy. He pleaded with King Ferdinand for another opportunity to prove his worth, arguing that he had more to offer Spain in the New World. Intrigued by Columbus's persistent belief that he could find a westward passage to Asia, and hoping to capitalize on any remaining potential for wealth in the Americas, the king granted him permission for a fourth and final voyage. However, this expedition, launched in 1502, was a shadow of his previous voyages. Columbus, now a man in his early 50s, was plagued by illness and the weight of his past failures. His fleet, consisting of only 4 small ships, lacked the grandeur and ambition of his earlier expeditions. The voyage itself proved to be a challenging ordeal, beset by storms, disease, and dwindling supplies. Columbus, his health deteriorating, was forced to abandon his search for a westward passage and instead focused on exploring the coast of Central America, hoping to find gold and a route to the Pacific Ocean. His efforts, however, were met with frustration and setbacks, further cementing his reputation as a man out of step with fortune and increasingly detached from reality. Columbus's final voyage ended in disappointment and disillusionment. He returned to Spain in 1504, a shadow of his former self, his health broken, his reputation in tatters. Columbus died in Valladolid, Spain on May 20th, 1506. Columbus's legacy became increasingly intertwined with the darker aspects of European colonialism. His fall from grace serves as a reminder that history is rarely a simple narrative of heroes and villains. Columbus's relationship with Spain was fraught with tension and disappointment. While his discoveries brought him fame, his failures as an administrator soured his standing with the Spanish monarchs. His arrest and public trial left Columbus deeply resentful. The Spanish crown grappled with his mixed legacy. They acknowledged his role, but grew wary of his ambition and inability to maintain order. Eventually, they stripped him of his governorship. Columbus's demands for greater rewards strained his relationship with the court. He failed to grasp the monarch's shifting priorities. The court grew weary of his complaints. This reflected a broader shift in European exploration. The initial excitement gave way to a ruthless pursuit of wealth. Columbus, once hailed as a visionary, found himself out of step with the changing times. Columbus's discoveries challenged the papacy, raising questions about territorial rights and the Church's role. Pope Alexander VI issued papal bulls granting Spain sovereignty over new lands, promoting Christianity. These bulls legitimized European ambitions, dividing the non-Christian world between Spain and Portugal. They ignored indigenous claims, advancing European colonialism and setting the stage for conflict. Columbus sought patronage from European monarchs, but England and France showed little interest. Their focus was on internal consolidation and rivalry, not risky voyages. Henry VII of England was rebuilding after the War of the Roses. Charles VIII of France focused on military campaigns in Italy. Their disinterest allowed them to learn from Spain and Portugal's New World ventures. By the 16th century, England and France emerged as major colonial powers. Columbus's voyages ignited a race for empire among European powers, each seeking to claim territory and establish dominance in the New World. This competition had profound consequences for indigenous peoples, leading to wars, skirmishes, and displacement. The Treaty of Tordesillas failed to prevent clashes over territory and resources. Columbus's legacy is one of discovery and unintended consequences, reshaping the world in often brutal ways. The figure of Christopher Columbus, once a symbol of daring exploration, has undergone a profound reassessment in modern times. The traditional narrative of a courageous adventurer has been challenged, revealing a more complex and troubling legacy. Columbus's voyages had a devastating impact on indigenous populations and initiated centuries of European colonialism. Modern historians have scrutinized Columbus's journals, revealing his ambition, greed, and capacity for cruelty. This reassessment has painted a less flattering portrait of the explorer. His role in enslaving indigenous people and initiating the transatlantic slave trade casts a dark shadow over his accomplishments. The reassessment of Columbus extends beyond academic circles. Public discourse has grappled with the implications of his legacy, leading to debates about honoring him. Some argue his contributions to navigation should be recognized while acknowledging the negative aspects. Others contend that celebrating Columbus ignores the devastating consequences of his voyages. This debate reflects a broader reckoning with the complexities of history and the need for a more inclusive understanding of the past. Columbus's legacy is intertwined with the complex and often brutal history of European colonialism in the Americas. His voyages marked the beginning of profound change for indigenous peoples characterized by conquest, disease, and cultural disruption. The arrival of Europeans had catastrophic consequences for native populations. European diseases decimated populations and weakened societies. The transatlantic slave trade forcibly transported millions of Africans, contributing to systemic racism. The conquest and colonization led to the displacement and dispossession of countless indigenous peoples. Their lands were seized, cultures suppressed, and ways of life disrupted. The weight of this history is inescapable when considering Columbus's legacy. It is impossible to separate his voyages from the suffering inflicted upon indigenous populations. Recognizing this weight demands a nuanced perspective on his role as an agent of both discovery and destruction. For centuries, the story of Christopher Columbus has been told from a predominantly European perspective, focusing on his ambition, his discoveries, and his role in shaping the course of Western civilization. However, in recent decades, there has been a growing movement to center the narratives and experiences of indigenous peoples, to understand the arrival of Columbus and its aftermath from their point of view. From the perspective of many indigenous communities, Columbus's arrival did not mark the discovery of a new world, but rather the beginning of a long and painful era of invasion, dispossession, and cultural genocide. Their stories, passed down through generations, tell of resistance, resilience, and the enduring impact of colonialism on their cultures, languages, and ways of life. Indigenous scholars, artists, and activists have played a vital role in challenging the dominant narrative surrounding Columbus, offering alternative perspectives that highlight the resilience and resistance of native peoples in the face of oppression. They have emphasized the importance of understanding history from multiple viewpoints, recognizing that there is no single objective truth, but rather a tapestry of experiences shaped by power, privilege, and perspective. Listening to indigenous voices and incorporating their perspectives into the narrative of Columbus is essential for a more complete and nuanced understanding of the past. It allows for a more honest reckoning with the complexities of history, acknowledging the suffering inflicted upon indigenous populations while recognizing their strength, resilience, and enduring contributions to the Americas and the world. The legacy of Christopher Columbus remains deeply complex and contested, a source of both celebration and condemnation. He is a figure who defies easy categorization, his achievements intertwined with devastating consequences. In the 21st century, there is no single, universally accepted view of Columbus. Some view Columbus as a symbol of human ingenuity and exploration. Others see him as a symbol of European colonialism and exploitation. Celebrating Columbus can be seen as glorifying dark chapters of history. Navigating this legacy requires engaging with difficult truths and inclusivity. History is an ongoing conversation, shaping our present and future. The story of Christopher Columbus is a stark reminder that history is rarely black and white. His voyages, once celebrated as unqualified triumphs of human exploration, now stand as symbols of the complex and often brutal legacy of colonialism. The image of Columbus as a lone hero bravely sailing into the unknown has been replaced by a more nuanced and unsettling portrait, one that acknowledges his role in initiating centuries of exploitation, displacement, and cultural destruction. The uncomfortable truth is that Columbus's arrival in the Americas did not mark the discovery of a new world, but rather the beginning of a long and painful era for the indigenous peoples who already called these lands home. Their stories, often silenced or marginalized, tell of resistance, resilience, and the enduring impact of colonialism on their cultures, languages, and ways of life. To celebrate Columbus solely as a hero is to ignore the perspectives and experiences of those who suffered most directly from his actions. The reassessment of Columbus's legacy is not about erasing history or engaging in a simplistic exercise of judging the past by the standards of the present. It is about confronting the complexities of our shared history, acknowledging the dark side of exploration and conquest, and recognizing the enduring impact of colonialism on the world we live in today. It's about listening to and amplifying the voices of those who have been marginalized and silenced, incorporating their perspectives into a more inclusive and accurate historical narrative. The legacy of Christopher Columbus is complex and controversial, sparking a broader conversation about history and its implications. It has led to the removal of statues, renaming of holidays, and a focus on indigenous perspectives. These changes reflect a growing awareness of the need for inclusivity and equity. Columbus's story serves as a cautionary tale about ambition and cultural sensitivity. It reminds us to learn from the past for a more just future.